She faked her death to escape the mating claim. Then he saw her at her own funeral. Seraphine Valdis had always been good at disappearing. Not in the dramatic way that people imagined when they heard the word escape. She did not run through forests with her heart pounding and her breath coming in sharp bursts. She was far too careful for that. She planned. She measured. She thought 3 steps ahead of everyone around her, and then she thought 3 more. So when the bond snapped into place at the blood moon gathering, she did not scream. She did not cry. She stood very still at the edge of the ceremonial fire, felt the invisible thread pull tight between her chest and the chest of a man she had never spoken to, and she made a decision in the space of a single breath. She was going to die. Not really, of course, but everyone else was going to believe it. The man across the fire was Calum Draven. She knew who he was before the bond ever formed. Everyone in 3 territories knew who he was. He was the alpha of the Ironmoor pack, and he wore that title the way most men wore scars, permanently, and with a certain quiet that was more dangerous than noise. He was tall and broad-shouldered, with dark hair and eyes that had gone a deep, burning gold the moment the bond connected. He was looking at her the way no one had ever looked at her before, as though she were the only solid thing in a world that had suddenly lost its footing. She looked back at him for exactly 2 seconds. Then she turned and walked away through the crowd. She had 3 days. She used all of them. Her only trusted friend in the world was a woman named Mira, a half-witch healer who lived at the edge of the Ashveil Pack's territory and who owed Seraphine a debt that had never been repaid. Seraphine collected that debt the very next morning, sitting at Mira's small kitchen table, with her hands wrapped around a mug of tea she was not drinking. "You understand what you are asking me," Mira said. It was not a question. "I understand exactly what I am asking you," Seraphine replied. Mira looked at her for a long time. She was a small woman with clever eyes and a habit of chewing her lower lip when she was thinking hard about something. She chewed it now. Then she stood up, went to her cabinet, and began pulling out herbs. The plan was not simple, but it was precise. A staged drowning at the river's edge, a scent trail carefully poisoned with death-blooming herbs that would confuse even the sharpest wolf nose into reading decay. A bundle of weighted cloth floated downstream, just visible enough to be found, just ambiguous enough not to be questioned. A story, told to the right people at the right time, about how Seraphine had gone to the river alone the night before the claiming ceremony. The Ashveil Pack reported her death to Ironmoor the following morning. She was already gone. She settled in a mountain town 4 hours east, in a small rented room above a hardware store on a quiet street. She found work at a veterinary clinic within the first week. She dyed her hair a deep brown. She took Mira's tinctures every morning and every night to suppress her scent, covering the part of herself that could be tracked. She chose a new name, Ray Voss, and she used it so consistently that within 2 months, it had begun to feel like her own. She told herself she was free. On the good days, she almost believed it. The months moved forward, the way months do when a person is trying very hard not to think about something. She worked. She went for long walks in the early mornings. She learned the names of her neighbors and the schedule of the town and the way the light fell through the window of the clinic at 4 in the afternoon. She built a life, small and quiet and entirely hers. She did not think about Calum Draven. Or rather, she tried not to. Sometimes, in the hour before sleep, she wondered briefly what he had done when he heard the news. She imagined him moving on without much difficulty, finding another bond, filling his pack's political needs some other way. She imagined him barely pausing. She was wrong about that, though she did not know it yet. 3 months after her disappearance, Mira sent word through a careful, roundabout channel, a letter tucked inside a seed catalog, the message written in the old plant language that only the 2 of them knew. Seraphine's father had died. A quiet death, a short illness, nothing dramatic. The Ashveil Pack was holding a memorial, and because the timing aligned, and because tradition demanded it, they were also holding a formal rites ceremony in her honor, a closing ritual for the dead. A goodbye for a woman who was not dead. Seraphine held the letter for a long time. She knew she should not go. She ran through the logic of it clearly and honestly, the way she always did, and the logic all pointed in the same direction. It was dangerous. It was reckless. It was exactly the kind of mistake that careful people did not make. But her father was gone, and she had not been there. She had not been there for 3 months. And grief, as it turned out, did not care at all about logic. She went. She wore a long dark coat. She kept Mira's tincture doubled that day. She pressed the glamour charm Mira had sent along with the letter into her left palm and held it the entire drive. She parked far from the gathering site and walked the last mile through the trees, staying at the outer edge of the forest clearing where her people had come together. She watched them from a distance. She saw familiar faces, aged by the season and by sadness. She saw her father's old friends standing in a cluster near the carved wooden marker at the center of the clearing. She saw a second marker beside it, smaller and newer, with her name cut into the grain. Seeing her own name on a memorial stone was a strange thing. She had prepared herself for it, or thought she had. She had not prepared herself well enough. She was pressing her hand over her mouth, keeping herself still, when she saw him. Calum stood apart from the Ashveil wolves, on the opposite side of the clearing. No one had invited him. Several pack members had gone rigid at his presence, their shoulders drawing up, their chins lifting, the instinctive resistance of wolves, who did not welcome a foreign alpha into their grief. But no one spoke against him. You did not challenge an Ironmoor alpha without very good reason, and standing quietly at the edge of a memorial was not reason enough. He was not looking at the crowd. He was not performing a presence. He was simply standing with his hands at his sides, his gaze fixed on the memorial stone that carried her name, and there was something in his stillness that struck Seraphine like a hand pressed flat against her chest. He had come alone. He had come to a funeral for a woman he had never spoken to, for a pack that did not want him there, and he had come alone, without ceremony, without announcement, as though he simply could not make himself stay away. She should have moved. She should have stepped back into the trees and left quietly and driven 4 hours east and never spoken of this to anyone. Every careful, rational, 3 steps ahead part of her was saying exactly that. She did not move. And then, slowly, as though something outside of either of them had grown tired of waiting, he turned. The clearing was full of people. There was distance between them. There was a disguise and a charm and 3 months of chemical suppression between them. None of it mattered. His eyes crossed the full width of the space between them and landed on her face. And the bond, which she had pressed down and locked away, and refused to acknowledge for 93 days, came alive in her chest like a struck match. She stopped breathing. He crossed the clearing without hurrying. The crowd moved without fully understanding why, parting around him on instinct. He stopped, 2 feet in front of her. This close, she could see that his jaw was tight, and his eyes had gone that deep, burning gold. He was holding himself very carefully, the way a person holds a glass that is already cracked. He did not speak immediately. He looked at her face the way someone looks at a thing they believed they had lost, and the expression was complicated enough that she could not name it. Then he said, very quietly, "You let me bury you." Not an accusation. That was the thing that made it land so hard. It was not angry or cold. It was simply a statement of fact, offered with the exhausted precision of a man who had spent 3 months carrying something heavy and had only just set it down. Seraphine did not look away. She had rehearsed silence as a defense her entire life, but she found she could not use it now. "Yes," she said, "I did." "Why?" She told him. She did not soften it or wrap it in apology. She told him about the women she had watched disappear into claiming bonds, absorbed into their alpha's pack and their alpha's politics, until nothing of themselves remained. She told him that she had looked at the world he represented and seen a door closing. She told him that she had no evidence he would be any different from what pack law had always demanded, and that she had not been willing to bet her entire future on the hope that he might be. She told him all of it, standing in the clearing beside her own memorial stone, while the late afternoon light moved through the trees and the wind moved through the grass. He listened. He did not interrupt her once. When she finished, he was quiet for a moment. Then he asked, "Did you ever consider asking me?" The question was so simple that it stopped her completely. She had considered a great many things in the 3 days before her disappearance. She had considered logistics and timing and chemistry and misdirection. She had considered risk and contingency, and every possible way the plan could fail. She had not, in all of that careful thinking, considered sitting across from Calum Draven and asking him a question. She said, honestly, no. Something shifted in his expression. I started reforming Ironmoor's claiming laws 2 weeks after your death, he said. Not because the council asked me to, because I kept thinking about a woman who chose a river over a bond, and I could not make that thought go away. He paused. I thought you were dead. I thought you had felt so trapped that you walked into the water rather than face a ceremony. I have been living with that for 3 months. The words settled over her like something heavy and careful, and completely unexpected. She did not go with him that night. She drove back to her mountain town alone, in the dark, with her hands steady on the wheel, and her mind moving through everything that had happened, with the same methodical attention she gave to everything. She was not swept away. She was not transformed by a single conversation. She was Seraphine Valdis, and she did not make decisions in the heat of a moment. But the bond was no longer suppressed. She stopped taking the tinctures that night, and she did not go back to them. The contact that followed was careful and deliberate, and entirely on her terms. A letter first, she wrote it by hand, 3 drafts before she was satisfied. He replied within 2 days, longer than she expected, and when she read what he had written, she understood that he too had written drafts. They were both, she realized, people who chose their words with great care. It was the first thing she felt they had in common. Then phone calls. Then a meeting at a diner in a town that belonged to neither pack, at a table by the window, in the middle of a Tuesday afternoon, when the place was nearly empty. She arrived first. He arrived exactly on time. They ordered coffee and sat across from each other and talked for 4 hours, and she noticed several things. That he listened the way very few people listened, with his full attention and without planning his next sentence while she was still finishing hers. That he disagreed with her twice, clearly and directly, without wrapping the disagreement in softness to make it easier for her. That he laughed once, briefly, at something she said, and that it changed his face entirely. She drove home thinking about that. The months that followed were not simple. Pack politics rarely are. The Ashveil elders were furious about her survival, not because they had missed her, but because a staged death was a significant violation of pack protocol, and there were meetings and formal objections, and 2 very tense evenings that required Seraphine to stand in front of people who were very angry and speak without flinching, which she was good at. The Ironmoor wolves who resisted Calum's reforms made their resistance known in ways that ranged from grumbling to open confrontation. One of those confrontations turned physical, briefly, and Seraphine handled her part of it with a composure that surprised people who did not know her. It surprised Calum too, although differently. He told her later that he had seen a great many people face pressure. She was, he said, one of the few he had ever watched hold their ground without making it a performance. She told him that was because she was not performing. He nodded, as though that was the answer he had expected, and somehow, that was the moment she knew she trusted him. The ceremony they held 8 months after the clearing was not a traditional claiming. It had no script, because no script existed for what they were building. They wrote the words themselves, with considerable argument, and 3 revised drafts, which felt appropriate. They held it outdoors, in the early morning, with only Mira and Orson as witnesses. Seraphine signed her name first. Her real name, all of it, written in her own careful handwriting. Calum signed second. When he looked up from the paper, his eyes were the quiet, steady amber of an alpha at rest. No fire, no pressure, no gold burning at the edges. Just a man on an ordinary morning, looking at the person he had chosen, who had chosen him back. The bond settled between them, not like something locked, not like a door closing. Like a window, finally opened, letting in the morning air.